What's good, Kenganda? It's your boy O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another podcast interview. And guys, we have a lovely lady here today. I'll let her introduce herself and what her channel's about. Go ahead and tell them.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Rennie and I'm the creator and host of the Afripolitan podcast. It's a podcast that basically discusses the African millennial experience within the diaspora. All episodes are available to listen to on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts if you type in the Afripolitan podcast, which is on the screen there. And we're also on Instagram if you type in the Afripolitan podcast. So yeah, that's me and I'm happy to be here today.
All right, all right. And it's great that we have somebody from the UK. Now, obviously, I've interviewed. I believe the Diaspora channel is also in the UK. She's in London.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I noticed is that, when we talk about the diaspora,
Yeah.
it's always about the Caribbean or the African American diaspora. And one of the groups that have actually been influential, in the diaspora Pan-African spaces have been the Black British diaspora. But for whatever reason, they're always like, oh yeah, there are Black people in Britain actually. Yeah. They're always forgotten about. Why do you think that the Black British diaspora doesn't get the respect that it deserves?
I think because African, like you said, African American, I think you guys dominate everything. Like, let me give media as an example. Growing up, we saw African American media. We saw the hip hop and the R&B music videos. We see the movies. Like, a lot of your culture is global. African American culture is global, but it also so that's how we're able to see it. And I think you guys don't get to see the Black British culture, the Black British experience. So I think that's why it's sort of overlooked. But there's always this thing of that, that Black Britons in the UK, that we don't experience racism, that, we live in luxury and all this stuff. And that is not the case at all. The Black British experience is very, 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 very similar to the African American experience. It's unbelievable. It's very, very similar. And I think maybe the difference is within the UK, there's a lot of people who have come from the continent to here. So, and they still have ties back home. So they'll go back home regularly to visit family. They'll maybe come here, work for a while, send money back home to build a house and go back. So I think also at the same time, maybe we're not really shouting about what we're doing within the continent, because the continent's still very close to us. So it's sort of normalized, if that makes sense.
I see. So let me make sure I understand. That's a very excellent point. I never thought about it like that. The Blacks that are in Britain, or maybe let's just say in Europe, it's not like African Americans who were stuck in America because now that's our only home because we've been taken away. Whereas the Africans that are in Europe or in the UK experiencing these things, they're just keeping silent about it because they don't want. Is it because they don't want to cause trouble?
No, I think. So when you say issues, like, I mean, like issues in terms of like racism and stuff, is that what you're?
Yeah, sure. Discrimination, yeah.
So no, in terms of racism here is very, very, very real. It's very, very real. The only difference is it's a bit more. It's not as overt as it is in America. Like, I've even been to America, and it's like a white person will see, just automatically think something new or just automatically say something to you. Whereas in the UK, they won't necessarily say, "Oh, the N-word." Or there are some places where that will outright happen, and it's happened to me before. I've even had when I was in university. I remember I went to university in Leicester, which is a city in England, and one day we were advised not to go into the city centre because there was like an extreme political party that were doing protests, and they're racist. So Leicester's a very multicultural city. There's a big Asian community there. So all the Asian shops closed. But I remember me and my friend went like near the city center, and they were chanting monkey noises at us. So this myth that we don't experience racism is not true at all. I think we have been speaking about racism for so many years, and even prior to last year, there have been Black Lives Matter protests in the UK, but I think because it's so that racism is so institutionalized, it's sort of like we talk about it, but we still sort of go ahead. Whereas with you guys, you've been having a struggle for hundreds and hundreds of years in America, so it's something you're not out of, so it's still something you're fighting. Whereas with us, although we do have that struggle, and we do have those barriers, I think we can still sort of go on with our day-to-day lives. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but the greatest point I think you made was that Black British people are still connected to, maybe you're one generation from Uganda,
Exactly.
or where you're from, or Kenya, and you can still go back and you can say, well, I'm having a tough time, but I can see like, my work is paying off in London and it's or Manchester, and I can see what's going on in Uganda. I'm building here, and I'll only be here for a little while. If I ever want to come back, I have that option. And so there's still some motivation to maybe go through some things to get to that finish line. Whereas African Americans don't have that necessarily ability to go to a place. It's very, very interesting point. Let me ask you this, because you said racism is more institutionalized in Britain. Can you give me an example of what you mean for those who are here listening?
So, for example, and let me give you an example of maybe like in schools or in the workplace. So in schools, you have teachers that they'll just maybe treat you differently, maybe mark you down, maybe put you in lower classes. So when we're in school, I don't know if it's still like this now, but when I was in school, you'd be in different, they call them sets, but you'd be in different sets according to how academically bright you are. So if you're like an A-star student, you'd be in set 1 for English or for maths, blah, blah, blah. So you have scenarios where maybe teachers will deliberately mark you down, or not really, not really value your talents. Although, Black people are very intelligent, as you know. Then in the workplace, maybe in terms of progression, it's not very easy for you to progress. It's not even easy for you to maybe get an interview in the first place, because they see your CV, they see an African surname, they see an Asian surname, or they're not even going to interview you. Like, even, I'll give you an example. When I first graduated from university, I even tried to anglicize my CV by putting my middle name in there, because my middle name's an English name. But I actually had a manager at the time while I was temping, and he said that you don't need to put that. You don't need to, and he was a white man. He said, you don't need to put your your middle name there. Your name's already unique. You're a unique person. So it's this thing of even being in the workplace, being sort of having that stereotype of the angry Black woman, just because you're confident and you're sure on yourself and you're an assertive person. There's so many things, even in the medical field, like Black women, they experience a lot of issues in terms of pregnancy when in hospitals, because there's this whole stereotype of, well, Black women are strong and they don't need as much painkillers and things like that when they're going through pregnancy. So there's all these stereotypes or things that people have about Black people, and it's in their subconscious mind, and it comes through out in the way that you're treated. It's not necessarily like, oh, you're the N-word, or you're this or you're that. It comes in how we are suppressed, basically. Even in terms of the areas where there are a lot of Black people, the majority of the areas that they're in aren't the best areas. Do you see what I mean? So, but that's what I mean when I say it's an institution.
Before we started, you did a really great job with that. You were talking about how the Black British people, and I've read some things about the impacts that Black British have had on the diaspora, especially in England. Some really people have went through some really, really tough things there, and they've opened up the doors for other Black Brits.
It's,
But one of the things that you talk about, because in America we have Black History Month in February, and I guess to be fair, which Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the man that formulated that for our community. And to be fair, in America, that was more normalized. We have the historically Black colleges and universities, and so Black culture is more integrated into the United States of America. Whereas, like everybody will know about Frederick Douglass, Nat Turner, even white people may know about them. But and not to say that they do a good job of promoting our history either, because they don't. But the Black British history and those people who have made a difference in the United Kingdom, in the educational system, are these people represented even to Black church?
Okay. Hell no. When I was in primary school, I didn't learn any Black history, and I went to school in England and also in Wales. Secondary school, I did do some Black history, but it was American history. We didn't learn nothing about the UK at all. So, and even with, and as I'm sure you can probably imagine, even with the American history, we did slavery. Then we learned a little bit about Martin Luther King, Marcus Garvey. Then went about the pop, the culture at the time of Black music and how that was popular in like the 60s and the 70s, blah blah blah. That's all I learned, and the only reason I learned that was because when you're 16, you do these national exams called GCSEs. And once you're 16 and you've done them, if you don't want to stay in school anymore, you don't have to. So it's only because I took history for GCSE. That's why I learned that black history. Obviously, it's true, but there's more to Black history than just that, if you know what I mean. So no, it's not promoted at all in education. But now there are organizations that are fighting for that. Like there's this organization called the Black Curriculum, and it's run by I don't know the name of the girl, but she's really intelligent. She's very young, and she's very passionate about ensuring that Black education, Black British history is taught within schools within the UK. And I think they've started to go around to schools and things like that and start to bring it into the curriculum. So things are changing. There's also this I think company called Black History Talks, and what they do is they do talks around London, and they take it to different spots and they just give you their Black history, in regards to where they're taking you. And then there's also another company I think called Black History Studies, where they do teach you about Black history, but I don't think that's necessarily Black British history. I think it's the overall history that we're not told, and not just slavery. So yeah, to confirm, we don't learn about Black British history, and unfortunately it's very sad because I didn't know until later on that there was the British Black Panthers. I didn't know that there was riots in Bristol, and how the same thing that that happened with Rosa Parks, and the boycotting is a similar thing that happened in Bristol in the UK. We don't learn these things in school. But like you said, there were so many people that paved the way for us today in the 1950s, and the 60s, and the 70s. There's so much history here, so much Black history here that we're not taught.
Let me ask you, because in America, there's 40 million of the what we refer to as the African American. So if I go to DC, if I go to Detroit, even though the accents are different, some of the cultures are different, we're all the same people. And we if you go to a Baptist church in DC, it's very similar to, are the same songs, same hymns, same style of preaching. It's the same thing. But in the UK, I learned that the Black community is not just like one group, because you have like Ghanaians, you have Nigerians, you have Ugandans, Kenyans, there's South Africans, there's the Trinidadians, the Jamaicans, and so and then you have obviously there's some people that are people from Sierra Leone. So it's not like we're our group is we kind of look at it, we're like we may have our issues and things, but we all know that we are all the same people, united as the same people. How is it in the UK with the Black community when you have all of these people from all these different sectors of Black culture, like let's say living in South London or living in someplace like that? How has the Black community resolve itself with all these different groups from different places, but all known as Black?
Do you mean like resolve itself in terms of like resolve the issues?
Well, let me not say resolve itself. That's probably a bad phrase. But I mean like the coagulation of all of these different groups to get things to be achieved, or to come together to work together to do things. Is there a lot of issues between the Black groups because of the culture differences?
So what I would say is, I wouldn't. Okay, so growing up, it wasn't cool to be African. It was not cool. What it was cool to be was Caribbean, and I don't even like saying African and Caribbean because we're all one at the end of the day. Even if African Americans, we're all one. We all come from the motherland. But so I'll say African Caribbean. So there was this thing of like everyone wanted to be Jamaican. It wasn't cool to be from Nigeria, from Uganda. It was not cool, and you would get bullied. Like people would get bullied. People would get called African booby scratcher. I personally never got called that, but I've heard of many stories where people have experienced that. So there has always been this whole thing of Africans versus Caribbeans, or African Caribbeans, as I'm going to say. So I wouldn't say that there was like differences between different cultures in terms of like Nigerians versus Ugandans and blah blah blah, because a lot of people intercultural date and marry. So like Nigerians and Ugandans, Nigerians and Zimbabweans, blah blah blah, Jamaicans and Nigerians. So a lot of people integrate in that sense. So I would say that there are like the stereotypes that people have about the different nationalities, and Jamaicans are like this, Nigerians are like that. Like those do exist, but I wouldn't say that there's clashes and issues between all the different cultures within the African diaspora within the UK. But definitely for sure there was this whole thing of it wasn't cool to be African, and it was more about being Jamaican and Caribbean, especially because that was the music that we would grow up listening to, as opposed to what's it called, like hip hop and R&B from America, and apart from like the UK music here. But it was more like listening to dance hall and all of that. Then I think maybe like around 2008, 2009, that's when Nigerian music started to become more popular. And then obviously now it's become global and blah, blah, blah. So that's when it started to sort of become cool to be African, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I hope I've answered your question.
No, you did. As far as the Black British diaspora, because I know, like for me, I'm from from Sacramento, and I was born in LA, but I moved to Sacramento, and then we're playing basketball, and if the teams come from Oakland or Los Angeles, they would look at us and be like, "Oh man, you Sacramento guys, man, because Sacramento at the time was like a cow town, it was like a farm place, it was like, man, you guys are kind of whack. You're from Sacramento, like you guys are dusty, And I talked to King Richards, who's a YouTuber in the UK, and it seems like when people think of like people from like Black, like I know like from like back in before I went to London and checked it out, if a person would tell me that they're from like London, I would be like, oh man, who's this corny dude over here, man? Like, like these guys are corny, you know what I mean? You from where? You from London? Like Manchester? Like stop, And then it wasn't until I started to really understand, like, oh man, like some Black people doing some really great things in the UK. Do you think that when it comes to maybe trying to target the Black British community, Because what I'm seeing is like, Ghana, they're going really, really hard for, at the if I would say like the Black American diaspora with the return home thing,
Yes,
being really more catered towards. In all fairness, I'm thinking that they're saying for everybody, but it looks like it's being marketed to African Americans more. Do we think that some of the other countries that have people in the diaspora, like I know Ugandans have like at least 50,000 people in the UK, Nigeria has a lot. Are the blacks in the UK being neglected by the rest of the Pan-African community?
I don't know whether to say that they're being neglected, but I feel as if our experiences aren't taken seriously. Like I think our struggles aren't taken seriously. And I wouldn't say. I feel like with the continent, they have their own issues as well. So I don't think that they could really. I wouldn't really expect them to understand what we're going through in the UK. Do you understand? But like I was saying in the beginning, the African American community and the Black British community, like our experiences are very similar. But what I've seen so many times is that African Americans don't really think that we go through struggles, and they think that they don't think that we're going through struggles, and I think that we're very privileged as opposed to you guys. And I've heard some of the celebrities, like when Samuel L. Jackson was complaining how Daniel Kaluuya, who's a Ugandan actor, but he lives in the UK, when he was in Get Out, that he's from Britain, so how can you play an African American? He hasn't experienced that. And it's like, I think he was chased. Something happened to him with the police, like he got like really attacked, and I think he even took them to court, or he did something, because police brutality exists here as well. It's not just an American thing. It's just that, like, it's not in the media like it is in America. So I don't feel like the Pan-African community has neglected Black Britain. I just feel as if the challenges that we face and the experiences that we face aren't taken seriously. And I feel as if anything, the African American community should be able to understand our struggles and should be able to be our ally. But I kind of feel like we're your ally. We love your culture. We understand you guys, but I don't feel like you guys understand us.
I think that might be because, well, I mean, obviously it would make sense that because the United States was started by people from the United Kingdom.
Exactly.
So I think that what it is just like, even when I was talking to King Richards just complained about not having, maybe some of the views because he was from Britain. And I was telling him, like, well, I don't think that's because that's the case. I think that maybe it's just, the strategy is a little different. And so then he changed that. I think for what the Black British YouTubers, when you do see them, they're doing like one of the biggest ones. I forgot this guy's name, Casey or something like that. That's guy
KSI.
KSI. Yeah. He's like a comedian, and it's funny what he does. He's hilarious, but when you watch him, it's not like you get to hear like what he's really talking about. If he speaks on these things, he might keep it to himself. And when you see, like, let's say the British Black YouTubers that are doing good, you never really hear them talk about what we're talking about. So it's almost like, well, the voice is not there. I think that what happens if we have more dialogue from that community, then it would be able to be more understood there. But I don't really know that there's a lot of Black British people that are on social media, at least that I've never, not that they probably do exist. I've just never really seen it. You always hear it from like, maybe, obviously the African American community. I've heard it from the Black Canadian community. But I think that if we have more dialogue like this and just were exposed more, it would make sense that, because we know white people, we know that they're gonna be up to something. So, but I definitely know that the black people in Britain are at the most likely to be at the bottom than at the top. Let me ask you another thing. I noticed that there's and one thing I like about the Ugandan community in the UK, they still have their beauty pageants and stuff like that. they still do. I'll be watching because I'm thirsty.
I'm I'm really anti stuff like that, but go on.
You are okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So we talk about that after the show. But so they still do things like this. But I always wonder, and a lot of African Americans wonder, like if for those people who are continental Africans
Mm,
and they are in the UK
mm.
and they have a direct connection to Africa. For like me to do anything in Uganda, it took me going to Uganda like 13 times just
Yeah,
to meet
yeah,
people.
yeah.
And I'm thinking like how much easier would it have been if I just knew somebody that was there that was in my family. So a lot of African Americans, when we look at people from like the continental diaspora that is living abroad, and we're like, man, we wish that we had citizenship in Uganda or citizenship in Nigeria and had the opportunities to do some of the things that are available with, like agribusiness or available in the country. And we're thinking like, well, why don't the black people that's living in Britain or experiencing things, they already have a connection to Africa, so why don't they just go back? Why experience that for all these years? What's the challenges in the Black British community, be it Caribbean, or let's just say the African? What are the challenges in returning back to one's place that where they wouldn't be mistreated and discriminated against?
Okay, that's a very good question. But before I answer that, I just wanted to add, when you're saying that you don't really hear about like the Black experience and like hear from the Pan-African community in the UK, and it's more African American, like Black Canadians. But there is a. I just want to emphasize there is a Pan-African community here, and I have been to a few events before, but I feel like I don't want to say it's on like a low scale because there's a lot of people that are doing things within the community. I think maybe because it's not on such big scale in terms of like real radical like movements, if that makes sense. I think there are like Pan-African spaces, Pan-African channels, but they won't necessarily be calling themselves Pan-African. Maybe they'll be trying to do things within the community for like Black people from disadvantaged backgrounds, things like that, if I'm making sense. So I just wanted to emphasize that there is a Pan-African space, but I think you do have to research it to find it. Believe me, I had to do my research to find out where certain events were happening and stuff like that. And I also have seen some collaboration between. There's basically you should check out. There's a channel called Kush TV, which is like a Pan-African channel, British one, and they had Lord Jamal on there. I think he had been doing lockdown last year, and he was on there. So there is that collaboration, and there are people doing things. But I think you did make a valid point. It is not as in your face as what the African American Pan-African space is doing, and the Black Canadians. And now, in regards to people not going back home, even though we have our challenges here in the UK, I think it's a number of things. I think some people weren't, have maybe come from poor backgrounds, back home, lack of education. So coming to the West was like a brand new start for them. Was a chance for them to reestablish themselves and do something for themselves. So a lot of people don't want to go back home because what are they going back home to? And like you said that you had to go there 13 times to actually start doing something. So you've actually experienced firsthand. You even know more than me of how hard it is to actually set up a business in Africa, in Uganda specifically. So I think it's not always easy for everyone to go back home straight away. Some people don't want to go back. And I think, capital as well. Getting that money and going back and doing business, because it's all well and good going back and starting a business, but if it's a risk, you don't know if it's going to do well. You want to go back home knowing that, yep, I'm going back home, I'm doing this, and this is the plan, and you're actually ready for it. because I think it's going to be hard work in terms of setting up a business, but I think also mentally for you, it's going to be different as well, because the whole work, from what I've heard and from this bit of what I've seen, the work ethic is totally different in Uganda than it is in the West. So that's one of the things. And then I also think, I think maybe people get a bit too comfortable here as well. You know, you can, if you're not working, you can get money from the government, stuff like that. There's that comfortability, whereas you don't have that back home. So I feel like there's all the different reasons why people wouldn't just pack up and go back straight away, although it is needed. But there are so many people, especially even young people like our age, that are actually deciding to go back and build the economy and do great things in the continent using the skills that they've acquired here.
Okay. No, great answer. So for people who, I know that you're just coming to YouTube to grace us with all of that, pristine knowledge that you have, and I think you're going to be a really good creator. What will people expect if they're going to check out the Afripolitan podcast, or if they're going to check out you on YouTube when you start, creating? What kind of information are they going to get from your channel?
So it's just basically going to be conversations like this, like what we're having today. Because I would say I'm a Pan-African. I'm very passionate about my Ugandan culture and about going back home and having ties to your roots. But I'm also very passionate about talking about issues that we have within the Black community, not just in the UK but globally. So it'll be content regarding that. And also I work in the fashion industry, so I'm also going to be sharing more of my experiences of how to flourish within the creative industry as a Black creative, as I'm also very passionate about diversity and inclusion, especially within the fashion industry that is heavily influenced by Black culture. But there's hardly any Black people within senior management roles. So I want to sort of share my knowledge of how I got into the industry and how other Black creatives can get into the industry. So it's going to be, around conversations regarding the Black community and also about Black creativity as well.
All right. So guys, go to the first comment, pinned to the top. Those will be her links for the Afripolitan podcast, the YouTube channel, and all of that. And we definitely thank her for, coming on and sharing her experiences with us. Any last words you want to have for the Kenganda community?
I just want to say thank you for having me on this platform. If anyone wants to collaborate, I'm more open to collaborate. As I mentioned before, I'm on SoundCloud, the Afripolitan podcast, but also on Apple Podcast and also on Instagram, the same name. And also, if you want to send an email, it's the afripolitanpodcast@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any queries. So, just want to thank you once again.
All right, and thank you for coming on. And guys, thank you so much for your support. Check out the first comment pinned at the top of all information. And as you know, keep it real. Kenganda forever. We're out.